Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet. This review covers the Nighthawk Jeep Off-Roader. It's a 125 scale MPC kit number 0709. Now this kit is no longer in production, but they're still readily available at auction sites and in some of the larger hobby shops around. It's a skill level 2 kit with 142 pieces, molded in black chrome clear red, soft black tires, and water slide decals with nice instructions. The dimensions are about 5 3/4 inches long, 3 1/4 inches wide, and 3 inches high. Now this is a version of the CJ5 that was released from 1979. Now it originally came out in 1968, and there have been several variations of the kit all the way up to 1999. In this kit there were a few variations that could be built though, but primarily it was how the tailgate was completed and whether or not you wanted to put the top up or down. It also includes a roll bar that some of the other kits did not. Here are the contents of this kit, and we're not going to bore you by trying to pick up the sprues and tell you the parts, because as you can see, there they are. We're going to use some liquid cement for most of the construction, sometimes super glue for strength, or white glue for clear parts. And for the most part, you must remember to use the manufacturer's safety and use guidelines when you're using any of the products that you hear or see used in the review. Here are the decals for this kit, and as you can see, they're very colorful. The register is pretty good, but I would really suggest you use some of the aftermarket setting solutions for these larger decals to make sure that they settle over contours and stick well to the body. Also get a choice between stock and custom wheels, and it comes with either, so you have to decide which ones you want to assemble. So take the rim backs, there are 4 of them each, and the spare tire rim back, and those I painted silver color. And then the hub is installed into the rim back, and then the back assembly is placed into a tire. Now the custom is also inserted into the tire assembly, and for the custom rim, and then the rim back assembly, and now repeat that for the other 3 tire assemblies. Now for the spare, you can insert the rim back, that's number 33 piece, into a tire assembly, and then a custom rim is installed into the tire and glued to the rim back. Now the lettering on these tires are pretty prominent, so they're pretty easy to highlight, so I just used a little gloss white paint to highlight those letterings. So get the engine pieces out of the kit, and we're going to glue the left and right engine halves together, and then when that's dry, you can add the oil pan and attach that to the bottom of the engine assembly, and then the cylinder head is attached to the top of this 4-cylinder engine. Now the valve cover can be attached to the cylinder head, and the engine assembly is then painted gloss blue, and the transmission section can be painted aluminum. The exhaust manifold and the fuel pump can be painted aluminum before they are attached to the left side of the engine assembly. Now remember, whenever you're gluing parts together, you have to remove the paint or the chrome plating, if there is any, in order for the glue to adhere and stick the 2 parts together. So grab these pieces out of the kit, and I leave a little bit of the sprue attached to them, and then I can paint them by hand and then touch up anything that needs to be touched up after they're removed. So the distributor and the oil filler tube are painted gloss blue before they're attached to the right side of the engine, and then the starter, coil, and oil filter are painted semi-gloss black and glued to the engine. And now the carb, it gets painted steel, and you can give that a little tinge of light thinned gold paint for authenticity, and attach that to the engine as well. Now we'll work with these final parts to complete the engine, and the pulleys are painted gloss black and detailed with some flat black for the belts. Then the fan is painted aluminum and glued to the pulleys. The generator can be painted aluminum, or gloss black, and then attached to the pulleys as well. Now the whole pulley assembly is attached to the engine in the front, and the transfer case half number 16 is added to the back half or other side, and then the emergency brake can be attached to the transfer case. Now the transfer case assembly is painted aluminum and then glued to the transmission. Locate the parts for the frame and for the suspension pieces. And the front axle half, that's part number 8, is attached to the other half, number 9, and the steering gear box can be attached to the chassis. Now the chassis assembly, front axle assembly, and both front springs and drag link are painted semi-gloss black, and the front springs can be attached to the axle assembly, and then that is installed onto the chassis. Now the drag link is attached to the front axle assembly and the chassis, and the shock absorbers, I painted those gloss blue, and then they can be attached to the front spring and the chassis assembly as well on both sides. Now we'll work with the rear axle pieces, so get those out. And number 5 is attached to number 4. And then the rear axle assembly and both rear springs can be painted gloss black, semi-gloss black, I'm sorry. And also the shock absorbers are painted gloss blue, and the exhaust system, those parts are painted aluminum. Now the exhaust system is attached to the chassis, and both rear springs can be attached to the rear axle assembly. Now that whole rear axle assembly can be attached to the chassis. The shock absorbers are attached to the rear spring on both sides. You'll find that even this kit will have a little bit of flash on it, and so that's easily removed. Just use a sharp hobby knife to clean that flash off of the pieces, and you can use it to scrape off the parting lines as well too. Next we'll gather up the engine assembly, as well as some of these pieces that you see, and then the front drive shaft and rear drive shaft and the skid plate are painted steel color, and the engine assembly is installed into the chassis on the mounts, and the front drive shaft is attached to the transfer case and then the front axle assembly. Now the rear drive shaft is attached to the transfer case and the rear axle assembly. With the lower end done, now the body and the right front seat support, number 28R, and the left front seat support are sprayed some gloss black, and the front seat back is attached to the front seat. Then repeat that for the second front seat, and the rear seat back is attached to the rear seat. Now both front seats and the rear seat are painted semi-gloss black, and the front seats and the rear seats are then installed into the body assembly. Gather up these pieces, and then the firewall can be painted gloss black, and the pedal assembly can be painted flat black and attached to the firewall. Now the four-wheel drive shifter can be attached to the firewall assembly, and the firewall assembly is installed into the body. Now the shifter is glued to the center console section of the body assembly, and the parking brake is painted gloss black, semi-gloss black, and then attached to the body assembly between the front seats. Next, these parts, the dashboard, the cowl, and the grab handles, are spray painted gloss black, and the speedometer and grab handle can be attached to the dashboard, and the dashboard assembly is attached to the dashboard cowl. Now, as you'll notice here, the dashboard cowl has on it a copyright logo on the bottom, and you can remove that with a fine hobby knife or sand it off, but it won't be seen at all once the unit is completed. And notice that this one was made in the United States. Look for the dashboard assembly, and it can now be installed into the body assembly onto the interior tub. Now we'll move to the back end with some of the pieces that you see here, and the tailgate can be painted body color with gloss black, and then their tail lights are then attached to the bezels with some clear parts cement or some white glue, and then a tail light assembly can be attached to the body assembly, and the tailgate gets slid into a hole on that tail light assembly, and then the second tail light assembly is attached to the body, locking the tailgate into position. So use some slow setting glue there and make sure that you line everything up so that the tailgate will still be functional. Now we'll install the body assembly onto the chassis. So you want to do a dry fit here and locate the mounting positions where the parts run into each other. Then scrape any paint that you may need to off of there, and then glue them together with some strong glue, either epoxy or super glue, and then hold them into position for a good level fit. Gather up the pieces for the column and the wheel, and we're going to paint the steering wheel gloss black and detail that with some silver for the spokes. And then the steering column is slid into the dashboard and attached to the steering gear box, and the steering wheel is then attached to the steering column. Clear up these parts, and the windshield frame is painted gloss black, and then the windshield is installed into it with some clear part cement. Now the hinge pieces, number 212, are attached to the windshield frame, and then a hinge piece 211, it gets attached to the dashboard cowl. The windshield assembly then is installed into the attached part number 211 with no glue, and then second part number 211 is attached to the other side of the dashboard cowl, and then the other part number 212 is not glued on part number 212 there. Look for the grille and radiator pieces here, and then the front grille and radiator shroud, they get painted gloss black like body color, and the radiator and the upper hose then are painted flat black. Now the shroud is attached to the front grille, and the radiator is attached to the shroud. The front grille assembly is then installed into the body assembly, and the upper radiator hose is attached to the radiator and the engine assembly. The air cleaner top can be attached to the canister, and then part number 92 is attached to the side of the air cleaner canister. Now the air cleaner assembly can be painted gloss black, and then the assembly attached to the carburetor. Both grille braces are then painted gloss black before they're attached to the radiator and the firewall. Grab the turn signal and headlight pieces, and the front turn signals are detailed with some turn signal amber color, and then they're attached to the grille using some clear part cement or white glue, and the headlight bezels are attached to the grille. Now the headlights can then be glued into the headlight bezel with some Tester's clear part cement or some white glue as well. And now we can continue some work on the front end with these pieces, and as sometimes you'll find in these older kits, you may see some defects that need correcting, or in some cases use some creativity. Now the front bumper here had a chrome plating issue. It had a bubble on it which you could sand out and then repaint and get re-chromed, or you could plate it with some other method. But the bumper from a junkyard pile or just adding a decal can help. So in this case I added a bumper sticker decal from another kit, and that covered the area that was messed up. Now parts 42 and 43, there's two each, they get painted silver, and part 43 is attached to both sides of the front bumper, and then 42 is attached to part number 43. And there are two options for the fog light lenses, and I chose the chromed version. Now the fog light lenses, that's number 237, they're attached to the bases. And the fog light assemblies can be attached to the bottom of the front bumper, and the license plate then can be installed on the left side of the chassis assembly. And I used the MPC logo decal and applied that to the license plate. Paint the hood a body color, in this case gloss black, and install that onto the body assembly. No glue is required here. The hood latches are then painted silver and attached to the front fenders. The rear view mirror is then attached to the windshield frame with Tester's clear part cement or white glue, and then the left and right mirrors are attached to the body assembly. Now the side steps are painted silver and attached to the body assembly and chassis. The gas cap then is attached to the body as well. The aerial mast in my kit was broken, and as you can see, it's a pretty a fragile part there. So after shaking around in the box for 30 years, it apparently got broken. So I just scraped it off with a sand stick and then glued it back together. Then you can install the antenna to the body, and then CB radio. Get that, a CB radio is painted Tester's semi-gloss black and then detailed with some red and silver. Now the CB radio was the only way to communicate with the outside world from your vehicle prior to the invention of the cell phones. So then the radio gets attached to the bottom of the right side of the dashboard. To install the optional roll cage, you'll need to drill some holes. There's 4 of them that have to be drilled out for the roll cage parts to fit into. So to match the box art, the roll cage and both roll cage supports are painted silver, and then the roll cage gets attached to the body assembly, and the supports are attached to the fender wells and the roll cage. Now there are some fog lights for the roll cage. However, if you're going to put the soft top on, then you can't be using the fog lights because they interfere with the fit. We can complete the tailgate now, and there are 3 options for the tailgate: a license plate, a fuel can, or a spare tire that was assembled in step 1. The box art shows both the fuel can and the spare tire versions, and I added the spare tire to this build. The rear bumper support is painted tester silver, and then the rear bumper can be attached to that. Now the rear bumper assembly is attached to the body assembly. Now grab the soft top, and you can paint it by hand around the windows, or you can mask the windows off and spray paint it. But either way you do that, you have to be careful so that you keep the windows nice and clear. Now then, it can be placed on the body. Just set it on there. It doesn't need any glue. It's time to decal the kit, and although the decals look to be in pretty good shape, they're quite old. So I would suggest, and I used a little decal bonder to give it a nice overspray of what is really a lacquer to make sure that the decals stay together. Now the one thing that you'll have to do is that you'll have to cut them very carefully around the outlining edges of the decals, because the decal bonder is one single sheet of film. So you need to cut the decals out carefully to use them. And that way, when you put them in the water, they won't disintegrate, but it will cause them to be a little stiff, and so you'll need to use some of the setting solution to get them to soften up and conform to the body's curves. After the decals had dried overnight, I weathered the Jeep with a little of the Tamiya Weathering Master Set number A light sand and just gave it a dusting so it looked like it just came off the trails. I think that you're going to find this is a great kit and a great subject matter, and it's a lot of fun, and you can build it with a number of options. It'd be a great addition to any builder's collection, and it was used for just about everything through its years of production. Now the instructions are typical of the 70s and 80s, and they were a little lacking, but you can see here how to build the model because we give it to you in great detail. Overall, the kit went together very well. All the parts fit very well, and for the most part there was no flash issues, just your standard body parting lines, etc. But I think that you're going to find this great looking kit with the especially the standout decals is going to be a real head turner on the shelf. So if I were you, I'd go out and find one and put it on my shelf. Well, we hope you like this premium step-by-step model kit review, and so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. But you can find us on Facebook and at our website, rightonreplicas.com. Thanks.